Unfortunately, there are no other countries to cite, so I may also cite them. In a lifetime meaning since Kenya got independence, because some of the people in this hall were still existing then. China, Kenya, South Korea, Vietnam, many other countries, we were at the same level. Poor fellows, rugged. I want you to take your mind back there. The pictures we see. That was Kenya. Imagine that was the same South Korea. But what happened? Let's start with Japan, for example. Japan was one of the heralds of industrialization. Where did they start? They started with plywood, wigs, things that are basic in production. They don't require a lot of technology. Then, as these economies progressed of Japan, mechanization continued to permeate. So it became untenable that as a worker in Japan would spend their time in an industry to make wigs. No industry could afford labor to make wigs in Japan. They upgraded to Sanyo and the rest. They upgraded to radios. I'm sure most of your grandfathers had a radio called Sanyo, another Panasonic, those kind of technology. They upgraded. Then they handed over that archaic production, in quotes, to South Korea. By that time, General Park was the president of South Korea from 1960. So General Park was very deliberate that I want to create an export-led economy, an economy that is based on exportation. And then you can't export what you do not produce. So an export-led economy, consequently, is also a production-led economy. Secondly, to export, they could not rely on agriculture and the rest. They had to have manufacturing. So they took over with grace the manufacturing of wigs, dried fish, plywood. Yani zile vitu basic za kumanufacture. South Korea wakaendelea. I want you to see this. Since 1960 to 1979, 19 years, the exports of South Korea grew by 364 times. General Park had a committee that was purely looking after growing the exports. It was a monthly meeting. They were holding monthly meetings. He attended all of them. A deliberate policy around exports. After they produced plywood, then they came up with another model called chaebols. Chaebols are companies in South Korea that are so big and deliberately grew through the support of government. I want to paraphrase. This is public sector, which is government. South Korea had a deliberate policy of supporting private companies using government resources. Can you just imagine that? So they grew some companies called chaebols. The phone I use here is Samsung. Samsung started off as a company that was making dried fish. So the upgraded technology came to radios, now to phones, now to smartphones, now going to Internet of Things, progressing with technology as technology goes forward. Company like Hyundai, South Korea, it started off as a small trading company. Through deliberate government policies, government could literally give public resources to private companies because they were more efficient than the government starting parastatos. So government deliberately supported chaebols. Hyundai, we know today, started as a trading company, came to vehicles, shipping, now totally into tech and the current area around the modern economy. What am I trying to say? I'm making so many points together. In an economy when we make private sector thrive, the monies generated we call profits by an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur would only have one stomach, would only eat too much. What we need to know deliberately as a country, and especially talking to economists, is that profit in the private sector's hands only helps the economy because they plow back. Let me use a case of Dangote. Dangote started by importing sugar and importing flour. Then he came to manufacturing flour and manufacturing cement and sugar, the ones he was importing. Using the profits generated from trading, he was able to start production within Nigeria, which of course has a lot of ramifications of creating jobs, areas around forex and exchange rate. It has a lot of advantages. Currently, through the profits generated from selling of cement, which is manufactured in Nigeria, that money does not go to the government of Nigeria. But also this money, when he makes $2 billion in profits, he can barely eat he can barely spend $1,000 every day, even with so much opulence. So these are the money, where do they go? It goes to being reinvested within the same economy. Who does it help? When Nigeria, for example, is building the biggest refinery in Africa and among the biggest in the world, what is it doing to the economy of Nigeria? No more exporting of raw material, and therefore no more importing. No more exporting of raw material, and no more importing of finished oil products. You can already see advantages around forex, job creation, and the rest. So even here in Kenya, we must envy and promote entrepreneurship. And even the presidential awards, a significant amount should be reserved to job creators, and especially in the private sector. Because the work they do is not for themselves. When you make billions in profits, you can only eat just to retro. The rest you plow back, you create jobs, you accelerate the growth of the economy. To South Korea. South Korea now went 2 weeks, moved over, headed to Vietnam. Vietnam, before COVID, was the country in the world with the lowest unemployment rate because of lower cadre of manufacturing. Kenya, we have to find our bearing, and we have to leapfrog. We have to jump some stages, because if you go the way other economies have grew, others are already ahead in terms of tech adoption, and therefore we have to jump some stages so that we now operate on the current modern economy, and especially associated with technology. But as I finish, each comes with advantages and disadvantages. Technology is good. It creates value faster, and productivity per person is higher. But it also creates inequalities. Why? Look at the time Facebook was buying WhatsApp. They bought WhatsApp at 19 billion. 19 billion US dollars. But WhatsApp had only 52 workers. Just imagine a company worthy 1.9 trillion Kenya, actually over 2.5 trillion Kenya shillings, has 52 workers. It tells you in tech, whereas the current assets are intangibles around copyright and the rest, is also very labor light. And when you become labor light, then very few people would share on what we would call economic growth. And the more the reason, then we have to find a balance. The economic jargons and presentation, and also to talk as an alumni. And starting from the alumni side, you have heard my name definitely. I was here in KU. I used to stay hapa Kilimabogo hostels. Then something happened, because economics is also about business. From when I was in high school, for me, success was power and money, maybe by the definition of the village I came from. So we all had ambitions either to get some money, to be dependent from the poverty that we had already experienced enough, but on the other side, to be in a platform where we can make some changes in our society. And therefore, when I came to KU, my mind was almost clear that I wanted to do something around business and something around leadership. So when I came here in first year, what I did in my first year, first semester, was first of all to familiarize myself with KU the way it is and pay my school fees using HELB ya mwaka mzima. Nikajua kama nimejilipia fee ya mwaka mzima, hakuna stress ya school fees. Kwa hivyo HELB was at my disposal for the second sem. So second sem came, and I decided to launch those dreams together in my second semester, first year. The first thing I did was to go to KM. I am sure you have read about this, but I want to confirm it is true. I went to KM, got some space, rented, started a hotel, and so that people can come there more often, I called it Vatican. So, nikaanza ka hoteli using the HELB. I carried one of my classmates who was also part of Kwesa. We went to Gekoba, bought sufurias, tukaziwekelea kwa mabega, tukakuja pale matatu za KU huchukuliwa. I don't know kama, I'm sure it's still there. Then we came, and of course it was one of the capital stock for my hotel. But something happened because, you know, semesters, the way they are arranged, we report in September. So first semester ends when we are breaking for Christmas. Second sem starts in January. So around that mid or start of the second sem is when I was starting the hotel. So ndio tulienda na rafiki yangu, tukatafuta sufuria. Then tukiwa town, he told me we passed by Rudhuri Avenue, tukasalimia rafiki yake, girlfriend. First of all, I was shocked. Because as from the village, how could you be so elevated to have a girlfriend at that time? So tukaenda Rudhuri, tumebeba masufuria, lakini tukiwa na Wamwere tulikuwa tunaulizana, Nairobi siku hizi iko na uniform. Kwa sababu that time, we could see a lot of red in town and people in black. Tukafikiria pengine City Council wameleta uniform. Lakini tukaenda tena sasa hapo kwa rafiki ya Wamwere, rafiki yangu. Kwenda huyo mtu ana claim ni girlfriend, akatuangalia hivi kama hatujui. Lakini Wamwere akakoroga hapo kidogo alafu tukaenda. Since that visit, Wamwere was left. We came later to realize that day, the reason why people were in red, it was Valentine's. Then this girl was wondering, this fellow tells me he's taking economics in KU. Kwani economics ni home science, munabeba sufuria? From that time, Wamwere akaachwa ajisoti maneno yake ikae vile anataka. So, tukapelekana na hoteli yetu. Part of my classmates would come, they take a meal, then they tell me tukutane kwa class nitalipa. That is how my hotel could not do very well, it collapsed. Then the same semester, I also wanted to vie as a student leader. Direct from the village. Nikatoa posters, na ile pesa kidogo ilibaki ya HELB. I campaigned to be the congressperson in the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. Of course, I didn't make it. I was first year, I was defeated by around 4 votes. I almost gave up that hii maneno ya politics na business, I think I've started on the wrong footing. But I didn't give up. Second year, I vied again, not to be a congressperson, but to be the academic secretary. And I was elected in my second year as the academic sec of Kwesa. So when I saw Nelly presenting, even as that time, could not afford the way I saw Nelly presenting. We could afford a sweater and something else, then we move forward. I am glad to be back here. And don't wait for another speech. I'm already giving the speech. When I graduated in 2009. I called my parents, my sisters. One of is actually here, my sister. She's also an alumni here. So she came as an alumni. So we went to KUCC for lunch after graduating. So my mother came with other prayerful women. Wale wanaenda nao kanisa. And I told them I had a very special request. I had just graduated. So they were eager to know which request. I told them that my request is that they pray for me not to get a job. Not to get a job. Why? In my naivety, I had calculated that if I wanted really to be wealthy, I'm still not yet there. But, and also, if I wanted to be dependent financially, I didn't think getting a job would lead me there. So I decided I'm not looking for a job after graduating, deliberately. Not out of luck, but out of a deliberate choice. So I went to Kahawa West, Kahawa Wedani. I know most of the comrades. Our estate is around here. Kamae, Kahawa Wedani, Kahawa Sukari. I know that. So I went there, started my first cyber. And I don't want to give their motivational speeches. The one of, I started with an egg and now I am a billionaire. That's not the kind of motivational speech that I want to give. I am giving you something practical. You may pick 1, 2, 3 points. So I started there. Deliberately, I knew I don't want a job. Nikaumia sana the first few months. So my colleagues would ask for jobs in PwC, in Deloitte. I decided I don't want Deloitte. I want to be later an owner of Deloitte, not to be an employee. So nikaanza IT. I went into stockbroking. Over and over, even before I joined politics, I had refused to get a job. I had instead decided to do business in IT specifically, and also in financial services, which I still do up to date. What am I trying to say? We come to KU, we go to the other universities. Our conditioning has been getting a job is a very nice thing. Even that time, my mother was very disappointed. Because just imagine as a mother, you have struggled all along, and this fellow wants to take away bragging rights of you as a parent from saying, my son works with Barclays Bank, my son works with those big companies. So it is unorthodox. When you come to KU or any other university, the best way to transform yourself, because you are one of the agents of the economy, is first of all to make sure you are successful. I always say the way to grow the economy is to first make sure your own economy is good. When all our economy is here, our taxonomies are good, our small economies and individual are good. It is the sum total of individual economy or income or output that we end up calling GDP. So I decided that is the route. So when you are here in KU, I know maybe you are still thinking around there, but I want to confirm to you that you are not very wrong. When you think that you want to pass through KU and you want to get to job creation other than looking for a job, I just want to confirm to you that you are not mad. You are in the right track. Don't see yourself as peculiar, and therefore you think you could be wrong. I just came to confirm mostly you are right, the other people are wrong. The other thing, and forgive me if I don't give a very methodical speech, I just want to highlight a few points. I was going through the Forbes list. When I was in KU, there was a gentleman who was selling magazines at the gate, magazines and newspapers. And I was feeling so good perusing Economist. There is a magazine called Economist, another one called Forbes, there is another one called Entrepreneur, and there is another one that came recently that is called African Business. But by then, there was another one called, yes, it's that African Business. So I used to go at the gate. I rent the magazine, I borrow, namwambia nitasoma sitapaka uchafu, ananipea na karatasi, nasoma hiyo magazine, then namrudishia, anauzia mtu mwingine yule yako na pesa. Mimi siko na pesa ya kununua, I could rent. Nampea kitu, nasoma, narudisha. So, I fell in love with reading business magazines, and especially around economics and also entrepreneurship. So currently, when I was going through the current Forbes magazine, I want you to just pick this point. Number one person, the wealthiest in the world, is Bernard Arnault and family. They are from France. Their company is Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. What do they do? Luxuries. What are luxuries? Things that we buy irrationally. We are talking to economists here. Things you buy because of their value in exchange, not the value in use. You know, when you buy water, you are buying value in use because it's quenching your thirst. But when you buy a gold ring, what are you buying? You can't eat it. You can't, when you are wearing a gold ring, what is it? It is just ostentation. Ostentation, we can pay a very high price just to prove. The economy of luxuries in the world is bigger than the entire GDP of Germany. So that is why in the Forbes top 20, there is Bernard Arnault, there is Zara, Amancio Ortega. There are like 3 people from luxuries. But that's not the point. The number 2 person, who is the wealthiest, you know, is Elon Musk. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink. I want you just to identify which sectors are those. Number 3 is Jeff Bezos. Which company? Msiniangalie hivyo, tunaongea pamoja bana. Unaniangaliaje kama lecturer? Ako karibu kukuangusha kati. So, number 3 is Jeff Bezos. Which company? Which company? Amazon. Number 4, Zuckerberg. You know which company. Number 5, Larry Ellison. Which company? Oracle. Warren Buffett is following Berkshire Hathaway. The biggest investment of Berkshire Hathaway is in Apple. The single biggest, one of the largest investors in Apple is Berkshire Hathaway. The other one, Bill Gates. You know the company, Microsoft. Steve Ballmer, Microsoft. Mukesh Ambani is an Indian. Among the many companies is one called Jio, which is like the Safaricom of India, of some or that kind of a company. Larry Page, Google. Out of the top 10 richest persons in the world, if you just remove Bernard Arnault, the rest are in the theme of the current Kwanza Symposium. They are in technology. So when you are thinking about being an economist, being an entrepreneur, also think about which era are you living. And in that era, how comes in the entire Forbes list, there is no property developer, there is no industrialist. The industrialists are top, wako huko chini, akina Koch brothers. How comes in the entire list, there is no person in manufacturing, in oil and gas? How comes? Financial services, there is none. Yet 10 years ago, top 10 list of Forbes, it was all financial services. Nyinyi ni watu werevu, you already know what I'm talking about. That when you are living in this kind of an era, to capitalize on opportunities, you have to be aware which era are you in. So that as you recalibrate yourself around the most optimal opportunities that are there around the time that you are experiencing living. Now, let's also talk a little bit about GDP and Kenya. Because even as we graduate, not all of us will be in business. definitely. Some will work for government, some will work for other sectors. Kenya GDP, because that's what we study and we want to improve our GDP as all economists here. GDP of Kenya currently is around 16 trillion Kenya shillings. We are projecting to have around 18 trillion by the next financial year. As you know, GDP in terms of consumption, one, let me actually use expenditure. Not expenditure. Let me use the other one of GDP as a summation of primary production plus secondary production plus tertiary production. GDP of Kenya, the primary production is agriculture, mining, forestry, and fisheries. It accounts for around 17% of our entire GDP. 70% of all Kenyans are employed in sectors that has got something to do with agriculture. 70%. Secondary production. This is manufacturing, transportation, and those kind of things, including water supply and electricity. It is around 18%. The two combined, primary and secondary, is around 35%. Tertiary accounts for 65% of our GDP. What is tertiary? Yes, there is tourism, there is retail, there is warehousing and the rest. There is financial services, that is insurance, banking, and the rest. Now, the paradox I'm trying to make is this. 17% of our GDP employs over 70% of our population which is working. 65% who are in the service industry, 65% of the GDP does not employ even 20% of the workforce. As economists, what are we thinking about? As we graduate from KU, those who will be in public sector, what we must keep doing is to increase the productivity of every Kenyan. Because the productivity of every Kenyan is what becomes our economy. So that tells us, whereas many people are engaged in primary production and especially agriculture, productivity per person there is too low. Because Kenya, we always craft policies that are labor intensive. But we have to now reprog, because we have to keep our balance between continuous creation of jobs, and especially in agriculture, and mechanization. Because mechanization will make our production efficient and productivity per person higher. So that is something, even as we do our proposals here, those who are undergraduates, masters, and the rest, we think about Kenya to grow, we must think about productivity per person. We cannot continuously be bragging that Kenya is an agrarian economy. An agrarian economy should be just a segment to feed our population, not specifically as specialization. Now, there is something else called globalization, which is happening, especially promoted by the Bretton Woods. Globalization is what? We break our barriers, we make free trade totally free. No protectionism. But if we study the most developed economies, none, even one, thrived out of strict observation of the rules of globalization. Because globalization tells us we specialize, something we call comparative advantage. What is comparative advantage? We are told in class, economists should specialize in the things that they do almost naturally better than others. Comparative advantage, when you talk about Kenya, we are told is agriculture. And most of the African countries, it is agriculture